morning.
It feels great to be with you all on this Sunday, this beautiful, somewhat warm Sunday. Definitely feels like I've come home to my spiritual and church family. It feels weird that it was almost 8 years ago that I arrived here as a newly graduated seminarian, not really sure where God was leading me or where life would lead me. And here I am now, a priest, finally, after a long road, and just thank you all for helping me get to this place, whether it was formally on my discernment committee or just with your prayers and your presence. It really takes a whole village to make a priest, and I am living proof of that, so thank you. So this morning we enter into John's Gospel in the middle of several appearances by Jesus, the risen Jesus. In the passage immediately before this, Mary Magdalene is at the tomb. She is the first one to see Jesus. And she's sitting outside the tomb weeping when these two angels, these two men appear to her. And perhaps her eyes are blurred by her tears, but at first she doesn't recognize that it is Jesus before her. She sees a garden. It isn't until Jesus says her name, Mary, that she realizes just who is standing there. The next day, in the evening, Jesus appears to the disciples, who are trembling in fear, hidden behind locked doors. And suddenly Jesus appears to them and says, "Peace be with you. I, the Prince of Peace, am with you. You have nothing to fear." A week later, in the same room and at the same time of day, the disciples are once again gathered behind closed doors. Except this time Thomas, doubting Thomas, is with them. And although they have told him that Jesus came to them, although they told him about the wounds that they saw, Thomas needs more proof. He wants to touch the wounds and put his hand inside Jesus' side. But Thomas never gets to do that because immediately when he sees the risen Jesus come through that shut door, he knows that it is Jesus. And he responds by saying, "My Lord, my God," and that is all the proof he needs. Now in each of these scenes, we see the disciples' shock and disbelief at this Jesus coming to them. They watched Jesus die. They watched as the Romans took his body down. They saw the water and blood come out of his side. They knew that Jesus was dead. There was no doubt in their minds. And so, like all humans, at the death of a loved one, they begun the process of grieving. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969 wrote a very famous book called On Death and Dying. And in this book, she marked out the 5 stages of grief. Denial, which usually includes some type of isolation. Anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And as humans, we all go through these 5 stages. And it's not a linear process. We don't move from each stage to the next. And each stage takes different time for different people. Some people get stuck in the bargaining phase. If I had been a better person, if we had gone to the doctor sooner. Some people get stuck in the denial stage, the stage where they don't want to accept the fact that someone has died, and so they hide alone, away from the world. It's also tempting to see these stages as something like a checklist, right? Oh, so I got denial done, must be time for anger. Okay, anger's done, must be time for bargaining. No, Kubler-Ross offers these not as a checklist or something that you have to do, but as a roadmap for how this grieving process may work. Because it's a process that ultimately is totally confusing and completely irrational. And so she offers some road marks for us to understand what's going on. And we see the disciples go through these different stages. So first we have Mary Magdalene, who is weeping, clearly in the depression stage of grief. And when she sees the gardener, she quickly moves from depression to bargaining for Jesus' body. Please, where have you laid him? Let me have him, and I will take him. But then when she sees the risen Jesus, she moves to acceptance. She realizes that he did die, and yet he is alive. This isn't a ghost or hallucination. This is Jesus, her friend and her teacher, risen from the dead. The disciples, locked away, are in their denial stage. Isolation, fear, anger. How could a world kill their friend? And so they don't want to deal with this world. They hide away behind a locked door. Until suddenly Jesus comes to them through that door. And they can accept, like Mary, that he did die. And yet he is risen. They don't need to deny or be angry. Because although the death was real, something has changed. And finally, Thomas, who I think is unfairly called Doubting Thomas. He didn't doubt so much as he wanted more proof. He had questions. He wanted to see Jesus, just as the other disciples did. And so he comes to that room with them and waits with them with the shut door. And in his own way, he is bargaining. If I can touch him, if I can touch his wounds, put my hand in his side, then I will believe. But like Mary and the other disciples, when he sees Jesus, he fully accepts that yes, Jesus did die, and yet Jesus is here with me. Now the disciples don't go through each of the 5 stages, and they go through the stages they do go through fairly quickly. So they're not a perfect example of how this process works or how long you may be in a stage. But they do serve as a reminder for us as Christians that each stage is important. And that the stage of acceptance, what makes that stage possible is that God came to the world and brought Jesus back to life. The gospel stories could have ended with Jesus being laid in the tomb. And yet God came in and raised Jesus and said, no, death is not the end. Death is the beginning of something new. And our faith teaches us that with that knowledge and with that trust, the acceptance stage is possible. Now, God fully knows that we may not get to acceptance right away. He knows that we may never get to acceptance. And yet it is freely offered to us, waiting to be taken. Now, we all know that grief doesn't come just from a death. It comes from any type of loss. Loss of a relationship, loss of a job, loss of a friend, loss of a pet, loss of a place, a home. Anytime we feel that something is being taken away from us, the grief process starts. And so, like you all, I too am grieving that John is leaving. At first, I was in denial. I actually told him, I said, you're not allowed to leave. You have to stay in this state. And then I got kind of angry. How dare he leave me and us? Who does he think he is? He can leave when we say it's okay. And then I got really depressed. You know, what will life be like without John here in Burlington? When will I get to have lunch with him? When will I be able just to call him and say, can I come down and see you? When he's living in North Carolina. But the more I talked with him, the more I was able to accept that, as we all know, John is above all a man of God. And when God calls him to something, there's nothing that can stop him. And so I must accept and celebrate, as I invite you all to do, that John's answer to God is a gift to all of us. It's a gift that it opens a new space here in this wonderful church for a new priest and pastor. It's also an invitation for us to celebrate John and all he has done with us and for us in the last 8 or 9 years. And how that we got to know John, we got to work with John, we got to be with John Revere. And that's a gift that his leaving cannot take away. And so in the next few weeks and months, as you all prepare to say goodbye to John, I invite you to notice which stage you may be in. Are you angry? Are you depressed? Are you in denial? Are you bargaining? All in the knowledge that at some point, and I can't tell you when or how, you will come to acceptance. And you will know that John's leaving is not the leaving of you or me, but an opening up of God to come here in a new and exciting way. Amen.
Amen.